So it's all in my lungs. Ah, right.
You must be hard supervising.
I would far sooner give them the key and say, I'm coming back in a fortnight and do what you have to. So, right. Okay then, into number 4. I did not take this photograph. I stole it from Facebook. So, and the name of the photographer I've forgotten, but I did ask his permission. He said yes. So I thought it was a rather nice picture. So, progress and passion. Progress takes place all the time, doesn't it? We progress, whether for better or for worse. Things change. The quality of the change is often accompanied by passion. The passion for change creates something which tends to be better than change, which has just come because some legislation has forced it. So what I'm going to do is chop around a bit today, looking at aspects of progress which has resulted or has come through a great deal of passion. Very, very briefly, we have these eras, the Georgian, Victorian, Edwardian, and then between wars. We've covered the Georgian era, the Victorian era, and now we're coming into this period of the Edwardians, and then between the First and Second Wars. A time, I think, in this period, when I'm posing that question, was it our last feeling of self-confidence? I think it was. I don't think the Victorian era was one of tremendous self-confidence, even though we were progressing. I think it was that period between the two wars in Western, where we spent money like there was no tomorrow, and progress came with it. But the reality hit us with the war, from which I think we've never recovered. So let's just, can I close up? I've got reflection coming in from a car window, and I can't actually see. And where the gap is, that's where the...
That's the steam goes, but yeah, it's...
Right, okay.
Yeah, it's not going to help.
Well, if you stand there, that's fine. Okay, that's it. So, recapping on this point, that the railway, of course, it brought tremendous progress in Western, but the move into being a resort had already started way before the railway. And here are just a few recapping prints to show what Western was like. First passion was to make a promenade. Remember, before we had a prom, it was fields down to the sea. And it conjures up a wonderfully bucolic idea, doesn't it? Of cows wandering down to the beach from the fields and over the dunes. But as Western started to attract people as visitors, they wanted to walk along the seafront. And the first recorded instance we have of a promenade is in 1826, when this very rough and ready pebble mud pathway from Knightstone down to Mr. Lee's thatched cottage was thrown up. And it was later extended, just a couple of years later, 1829, down to Regent Street. So here we are, way before the railway, people actually coming together and saying, let's see if we can make some sort of little esplanade along here. And these old prints show the idea of the bathing latrines, the new parish church, leading down to what would be today Regent Street there. And again, an old print by Robert Gregory, painted by Robert Gregory. This is in the museum. You have to look carefully. It's not very good art, but here's the new parish church. This would be West Street coming on down then to the seafront there, and the beach idea coming through. Better quality prints now. When the Enclosure Act was enacted, 1815, it gave the wherewithal to flatten the sand dunes. The sand dunes, remember, went from uphill right where to Knightstone. So they flattened the sand tops. People have been complaining for years about the sand blowing everywhere. And on it created a sort of esplanade. And this as opposed to our previous one, actually had a wall, but you can see from this print quite clearly you could topple over the wall and straight onto the beach. Quite what it was like when we had a high tide with a southwest gale behind it and a mid-Atlantic depression, I don't know. I've never seen any reports, but it must have gone. When you think what the wall has to put up with nowadays. But here it was, low sea wall, gravelled esplanade all the way along the prom. We have to be careful about these prints because they are stylised. They're obviously made to look very good, and it's only proper people, good quality people you see in them. No riff-raff. And this is how Weston wanted to portray itself. Children behaving everywhere, absolutely perfect families, perfect manners. But from what we're interested in, it's that whole sweep of the promenade. Holy Trinity Church there, Knightstone here, Royal Terrace there, and the Royal Hotel there, the hotel field there. And this I think is a wonderful painting. It's Western, it's appropriate title, Western Sands by Henry Hopkins. 1860, this shows that same esplanade, probably more accurately painted than the previous prints were engraved. But you can see that low promenade, just the wall, Weston already with its donkeys, and the donkey boy doing what all Western people do, dozing and waiting for somebody to come along and hire a donkey. And in more detail. So these prints again showing the remnants of the sand dunes here, working your way around the bay. And more prints. This would be around to what was then Glentworth Bay, now Marine Lake. And then looking the other way, Victoria and Albert terraces, Royal Crescent there, St John's Church behind. And again, very stylised, but it gives the idea of what that seafront was like then. And more pictures from this era. So, the donkeys and the beach, right from the word go, right up to modern artists. This is why people with families come to Weston, isn't it? We have a beach, it is good sand, we have water, just tourists don't come at the right time when they moan that it's out. But it is incredibly safe, and that's why it's always been popular with families with young children. Kids can splash around without being taken off by some undercurrent, as opposed to the idiots, older idiots, who go out into the mud and have to be rescued time and again by lifeboat personnel. The big change came here in 1885 when the council, by then it's become a council, an urban council rather than town commissioners, decided they would invest in creating a seafront promenade, a properly built, engineered promenade, right the way from Burnbeck, Anchorhead, right the way down to the Royal Hospital, the sanatorium. This was an enormous undertaking for a town with a population half what it is now. It was a major feat of not just engineering, but of willpower, of determination and passion. And just as if some big project is proposed today, you'll get the usual people who either don't want change, or you'll get people who think it's a waste of money, or you get people who just don't understand it. All of that melting pot of objection would come up today as it came up then. But those who were proposing it pushed on regardless, raised the rate, got parliamentary approval to borrow the money, and went ahead with this incredible scheme. Now, this is actually part of the engineering drawing from that original plan, and you can see the insets here. And I've copied some of those insets into larger scale. Again, I don't expect you to see them on the screen, but you can see the levellings and the attention to detail. It's about this sweep around Glentworth Bay. It's about creating the rockeries, and it's also about finishing it off properly with the right, what we would now call street furniture. the right railings, the right shelters, the right seats, as opposed to what we tend to do nowadays. We tend to do one project and then go on to the next one and use completely different seating and different. So the homogeneous plan that we created with the Seafront scheme, we don't see being replicated in later schemes. Even attention to the way in which the walls are built. The fact that the walls had to be carboniferous limestone because that was local stone and very, very resistant, capped with a stone from the Forest of Dean to give it that rather nice top capstone. And that's what we've got all the way along the pond. And it's remarkable that wall from then, apart from one minor breaching at Knightstone in 1903, has never been breached. And okay, the big storms have lifted bits of the capstone, but the wall has never, ever been breached. And again, you see railings, not the sort of ghastly cheap railings we put up nowadays, which last 5 minutes, but proper railings, proper shelters, all well designed. And again, this is part of the passion, the confidence that says we are designing not just for the next decade, but for the next century. This is the stamp we are going to put on the place. No, we don't have that confidence, do we? We talk about designing houses for 40 years. Well, no Victorian would have done that. 140 years at least. And the ladies' cloakroom, I mean, it looks like it reminds me of when I was a little boy and I had my Triang train set, and you could get these different station buildings, but it's a bit like it's sort of hint of Great Western Railway. Yeah. And even a tension like this, sensibly, so that if there's a nasty wind coming in or it's a bit chilly and you still want to sit on the seafront, you can, because you've got this settle, this stone settle behind you, keeping the drafts or the unwanted winds away. And it's all still there now. Mucked up nowadays, of course, with the Zimmer frames that come all the way along the pond to stop anyone who might want to chuck him or herself over. And these prints, these sketches came with it, obviously drawn with very clean lines, but this is all part of what was envisaged. Notice the way around Madeira Cove, the landscaping has come down like that from the top. And basically, that's what we've still got, haven't we? I mean, that's interesting to see how here, this is one sketch, and then as time moves on, we get the introduction of shelters. And coming along towards what nowadays will be this building, drinking fountains, horse troughs, all of those things have gone, unfortunately. The sort of things nowadays we wouldn't allow to go. We would divert a road around them and keep them as features, but that's progress. And then along to the beach lawns, and again you see the idea on beach lawns of well-dressed people, the right sort of people. It never was like that, but this is what they intended. And even evening meetings on the grand seafront scheme, 1885. This is the reality. This is a photograph when they're building it. I mean, immense engineering works. You can see the Sandringham Hotel here. The Grand Pier would be coming out there. It looks as though bombs dropped on it. It's something being destroyed. This is all part of the building. And of course, what they had to do, because the slope was like that, when the prom was built, it was like this, and then a tremendous drop, which is why if you go around to the Knightstone area, it's quite a drop from road level down to the beach level. All that was artificially engineered. And of course, in what is now Marine Lake, then Glentworth Bay, rocks and shingle. This was not a sand beach. All the sand in Marine Lake is there because lorries have put it there. It's a shingle bay. But again, you can see that 1885 plan is basically what is still there. And I rather like these pictures which are taken in the same locations, how you see progress and change. And the crowds now beginning to come, because the railway brought the crowds. When it brought the crowds, the sort of people who came here before didn't want crowds, so they went further south. They went off to Torquay, and then when that got too crowded, they went off to Europe. Always trying to be one step ahead of the general population. And the museum has a fine collection of paintings, both oil and pastels and watercolours and sketches of this area. And I just run through these to give you some feeling for what clearly they thought. This is part of their passion at the time. This is how they see Weston. Very, very clean lines. Of course, manual labour was cheap, so you could afford to pay people to keep the place clean and tidy. You could afford to have an army of people planting and looking after trees, and that's all the way nowadays it could never be afforded. Which is partly why Victorian planting was so ornate, because labour was cheap. It's why nowadays municipal planting tends to be either herbaceous or bushes that can just look after themselves, rather than lots of bedding plants. So here then is the start down to Glentworth Bay from Madeira Cove. And see how that changed. That shelter there again. And the big Glentworth Court there, or Glentworth Hall, built for John Cox, who was one of those very early entrepreneurs, one of the band of merry developers, gradually taking over from the Lord of the Manor. Lamentably demolished. It should never have been pulled down for that hideous brick block. Anyone live in it? No, I made that mistake before. And then sweeping around from Burnbeck and Anchorhead and Madeira Cove around into Weston, you can see the tram lines. And
Horse-drawn trams, is it?
Sorry?
Is it horse-drawn trams?
No, they were electric trams from the word go. The only horse-drawn vehicle on lines was the first railway in Weston. Yeah. This is one of my favourite photographs at Marine Lake, or Glentworth Bay. I think I've shown it before. These wonderful wickerwork baskets. So much more style than deck chairs. You could really turn them around, so the wind blowing in the wrong direction, and Gran can sit there and the kids can play, and everyone. And it also keeps the sun's rays. So the Victorians, they may not have understood why, but they were pretty reluctant to get sunburned. Probably for the wrong reasons. They thought if you showed a tan, it meant you were a working class person who worked out in the fields or you fished. It was far better to have white skin, because then you didn't show that you did any manual labouring. Little did they realise it was also beneficial to their health not to be exposed to too much sunshine. But again, you see, it illustrates the tidiness. Mind you, you could see photographs of the town centre where it's absolutely heaving with advertising boards, but nowadays we would find really appalling. And again, another museum picture, just useful to have the dates on these. And this photograph taken from the Grand Atlantic Hotel, looking out on the beach lawns, no Grand Pier, of course. Dr. Fox's bathhouse here. Interesting for a number of reasons. It shows the narrowness of the roads, the material which covered them, and the beach lawns are literally just field grass, the odd tree growing, but a private area of space for people who subscribed to go on it or who lived in property adjacent to it. It didn't work, of course. Everybody piled on so very quickly. The rules were just ignored, and the beach lawns became an area for public recreation, which is their status to this day. Another great passion was to get people here. We had that first one, I'm not going over it again, the railway, that brought the people. But there were other ways of getting here, particularly by steamer. And in 1845, a person called James Dredge, he set up a packet station, landing pier and slipway company. He was a Bath engineer. And people subscribed to it to build this suspension bridge across to Burnbeck Island. It's the only print I've got of it, so I've doctored it and cleaned it up and made it as best I can. But you get the idea, don't you? It didn't work, of course. Dredge also submitted plans for the Clifton Suspension Bridge and didn't get approved there. This didn't work. It got washed away. He put foundations in and it didn't work. But again, passion was there because people were prepared to put so much money into buying shares. Sometimes, I mean, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. They did it because they thought they were going to make a good return, but also they wanted to see these things happen. This was an exciting time. But anyhow, 2 years later, it's gone. We had to wait until Eugenius Birch came here, 1867, the doyen of pier building in Britain, probably the most famous of all pier engineers. And he came along, but look at that. We'd had steamers coming to Weston for 42 years before we had docking facilities or landing facilities at Burnback. That's nearly half a century. They would come in across the channel or from Bristol and manage to tie up, given the state of the tide, of course, at Knightstone. And with little wooden jetties jutting out from that. Okay, it's all pre-risk assessment days. It's again, sort of thing wouldn't be allowed today. But 42 years that's going on until eventually Birch builds this, the only pier in Britain which links the mainland to an island. So the pier head is not on engineered structures, it's actually on rock.
So from that, the steamer quay, the thing
Yes.
going out to the right, was built at the same time as the main pier, was it?
Yes,
Right.
yes. And then another
Yes.
one
Yeah.
to low water was put out. And here we see the other jetty out into the low water. Now, this paddle steamer is coming in at low water. So you can see she's way down in the water here, and people have to get up a zigzag. A bit like if you land at Clevedon Pier, low water, you have to climb up. But that didn't last very long. Grand Pier also had an extension to low water. That was taken out during the First War. So it was very difficult landing there, very difficult to tie up. So that didn't really stay very long. But of course, Burnbeck couldn't just make its money out of landing fees. It was desperate that they, for the benefit of their shareholders, they could keep people on the pier once they'd landed there. And the only way to do that was to provide the next thing that comes into Weston, entertaining the masses, amusements. Up until the masses came, it was genteel entertainment, reading rooms, billiards, walking, horse riding, but nothing, lectures, civilised, genteel, nothing sort of rowdy. But this, in order to make money, pile them in. Put lots of amusements, water shoots, all sorts of things, merry-go-rounds, restaurants, bars. Get the trippers over here, take their money, put them back on the ship to go home. That was the idea. No, I'm not sure why that one has slipped in there. Anyhow, further, that did something daft. Further down the coast into Weston, 1903, here we're starting to build another pier, the Regent Street Pier, which later became the Grand Pier, in direct competition to Burnbeck Pier. Competition both in terms of entertaining huge numbers of people and also an attempt to get the steamers there. They actually built the pier twice as long as it currently is, 2 steamers tied up, and the third captain refused to attempt. And the whole thing was a complete financial disaster, and it was taken away. But here you can see the piles being driven in for that on the 7th of November 1903. 1904 it was opened, became the Grand Pier, and the architect, or the engineer, Peter Munro, and London contractors built it. Now you can see this is very much the Edwardian wedding cake, lots of frills type of design. It's a Hollywood set. It's all make-believe. There's nothing substantial about it. You could almost go along and push it, and the whole thing would sort of fall over. There's not a brick, not a stone. It's all about giving a visual image, giving something. Oh wow, look at that! But it's made of nothing. But that's what piers were like. It just looked. I mean, this could be the Durbar in India, couldn't it? You could imagine King Edward VII on an elephant coming past her. It's that sort of over the top fancy stuff. This is typically Edwardian. But everyone's having a great time. And inside, of course, the entertainment is theatrical. No amusements. This is a quality theatre. This is where you go to the opera, or this is where you go to music hall, this is where you go to hear some of the great names in England at the time came here to sing. Paul Robeson, Dame Clara Bott, these Pavlova, the dancer. You know, these are people on the international circuit who come to play on the stage at the Grand Pier. And very ornate it is indeed. But again, the ornate design is wafer thin. Have you been to the Curzon Cinema in Clevedon? That really is wonderful, and it looks so ornate. You tap the wall; it's all tin, just been shaped to look good. But that was the passion of the owners, the designers. They were after the punters, and the punters came in. Meanwhile, back to Knightstone, things are changing. Dr. Fox's Bath House is no longer just appealing to the wealthy people who need a bit of recovery. It's appealing to a wider market. The council has bought the island and has decided to extend the island, and on the extension to build new facilities. And this photograph is actually towards completion of the new Knightstone Theatre, 1902, so we're just into the Edwardian period. This is interesting, that doesn't exist. I'm not sure when that part was taken down. And this is inside the theatre again. Well, theatre was the great entertainment. Cinemas hadn't yet been invented, neither television, of course, so you went out to these big things. Meanwhile, next door, the council had built its own municipal swimming baths. This was a time when local authorities were beginning to show interest in educating the public to a more healthy way of living, and swimming was part of that, and it branched out then into municipal sports grounds, cycle tracks, football pitches, cricket pitches, all to get people more active. And this rather fine. This on the roof is the reputed knight, the Roman knight, whose skeleton was discovered on the island when Dr. Fox's bathhouse was being built. They did discover a skeleton. It was nearly 7 foot tall. He wasn't Roman, he was Iron Age. And he certainly wouldn't have looked like that. But anyhow, there he is on the top of Knightstone Baths to remind us of the knights who came on the stone. Therefore, Knightstone comes as a result of him being found there. Inside, again, good Edwardian fussiness. Let's get everyone in, and here's opening day. Meanwhile, back to Glentworth Bay. Fine if the water's in, you have a really good time, but of course we all know what happens when water goes out. So, councillors began to say, well, hang on, surely we can trap the water. So from as early as 1871, they were thinking of ideas of building a causeway across from Knightstone to Anchorhead to trap the water. This is one of the ideas. This plan was published in the Western Gazette in 1927. Yes, 1927. And it shows basically what we ended up with. Knightstone here, and the across to Anchorhead there, and a new promenade to go around. And the new promenade, of course, was on the line of the Victorian one, but with a wall just a bit further out. Those of us who are from here will remember that being destroyed in the flood of 1981. But here it is. That's the scheme as envisaged. Council had to raise money and get parliamentary approval for it. Quite easy. Government was very worried about insurrection and potential revolution. The Russian Revolution was only 10 years old. Economic woes, marches, trades unions, government saying to councils, for heaven's sake, we've got mass unemployment, can you all think of ideas to keep men working? And Western came up with this idea, and so we imported unemployed Welsh coal miners to come over here and build it. So that kept them employed. It kept them away from the revolutionary fervour. I mean, government was really, really uptight about possible revolution. I mean, crowned heads in Europe were falling, had fallen in the First War. We didn't want it happening here. So out of that fear came our Marine Lake. And of course, Marine Lake was the new name. It conjured up a new world. So out with the old Glentworth Bay, let's call it by the trendy new name, Marine Lake. And here they are, actually building it. The usual method of building, caissons, fit it up with concrete, and that's basically how it remained up until we, post-1981, had to build a wider causeway and put in better sluice gates. They weren't quite sure how to dredge, given that the mud comes in, and then when water inside is inactive, all the mud sinks. Mud in suspension is no problem. It's when you have gentle water, it goes down, and very quickly the mud level rises. So the idea was you simply employed men in the winter to shovel it out. They even had a winch up here which pulled a sort of wooden plough, and you had to physically push the mud, tip it over into the sea, and hope it went away. Well, it didn't, it came back in, but if you did it every year, then... and of course, Marine Lake now is just a great muddy thing with a couple of inches of water on it again. So it needs a major... just putting the sluice gates in, it never washes out because there's not enough current in there to push the water out. But there we are. It was a good idea. And this is the 1930s overhang that was then created. And it's that which was destroyed in the 1981 storm. And so it went back then to the original Victorian wall, which you can just see along there. And this had water chutes and slides, and people dive into it. And you see here the Cove Music Gardens. I won't bother, that's just one of the plans. And so you can see the views and how popular. I mean, just look at that photograph. A bank holiday, absolutely teeming with people. I wasn't in Western this bank holiday, but I imagine the crowds were the same. I was in London. I think everybody had abandoned London. It was great. It all come down to the seaside. And And all the sand, of course, had to be brought in by lorry and put there, because otherwise it would just be shingle. Entertainment then carried on. The council came up with this idea of creating a summer and winter garden, where people could perambulate in the gardens with greenhouses and some entertainment. And the idea was to build one just off the boulevard. And so here this grand archway was put up, and you went through the grand archway to the gardens inside and the various buildings which were there, tea rooms and so on. 1881 that was created. Then inside, Mr. Fredericks established one place as a cinema. It became the Tivoli Cinema in 1928, and then it was all bombed in 1942. And that building was hit, and you can see there, here it is, the boulevard. Bohemian love is being shown. It's a bit risque for Weston-super-Mare, but heck, this is the era when we were being a bit risque. But come the war, that had gone, and that's now the block of flats, Tivoli Flats in the boulevard. With this era, then we move into the 20s and 30s. It's the jazzy 20s, the Art Deco 30s. It's a time when social mores, the Victorian social mores, are really being tested in the same way that today social mores are always being tested. But we'd come out of that rather stifling Victorian starch collar approach to life, and the Edwardians were saying, "Sod that, let's have a party." And this is the result. This is the 20s and 30s. Winter gardens, not on the boulevard site, but a new winter garden. So it all starts here. The council bought the hotel field there by compulsory purchase in 1922 and set about creating winter gardens, except it needed a pavilion to go with the winter gardens as well, because in the winter, you can't just spend your time walking around nice gardens, because for obvious reasons you wouldn't want to, unless you could afford something like Kew with the most enormous glass house, and clearly Weston couldn't. So this is an idea that came out. This is published, and it started. The first part was the Italian garden. 1925, the council's surveyor Harry Brown potters off to a place called Beddington House in Croydon, which is being demolished, and borrows a whole line of Italianate walling, puts it on a lorry, brings it back to Weston. So we get that. The land is bought thanks to a bequest from Henry Butt, the first mayor, who'd been prosecuted by the council for damaging the council's roads with his lorries from he owned Milton Quarry. He went all the way up to the High Court. He lost, but to show no hard feelings, not only did he pay the council's costs and his own, but he then bought that field and gave it to the council. An interesting character. So this was the first section then to be laid out. And it's only called the Italian Gardens because the balustrade is Italianate. Where it came from, other than Beddington House, I know not. And that's as it matured. And then behind it, the English garden was set out: alpine gardens, rockeries, rose beds, and putting green. And again, it was all part of the overall scheme. But of course, this was in an era before we had the volume of private motor cars that we now have. It was also in an era where people didn't expect as many sorts of entertainments as we would now expect. And of course, for much of the year you couldn't go there because of chucking it down with rain. And as you can see in that photograph, half a dozen people there, if that. But as a green heart in the centre of the town, very attractive. Then the next phase is to build the pavilion and build it on the seaside so that you make the gardens a little more protected, rather than putting the pavilion back there, only to have it exposed towards the sea. And here you can see the design. it was a sort of flattened dome, flattened because the Royal Hotel owned the covenant on it. And the covenant said no building should be more than 40 feet high. And consequently, the architects had to do like that. And that covenant remained with the hotel until the college bought it out a year ago. So the college now owns the covenant on its own building, which is probably quite sensible. But here you see the structure. Plus, of course, these colonnades going up outside the fish pond. Mawson was a great designer, England's finest gardener. He was president of the Royal, I won't say Horticultural Society, it might well be, but he was the country's principal landscape gardener. Coming to West, again, confidence. Here's Weston saying, we don't want any old gardener, we'll have the country's best. And he came to lay it all out. And inside, there was no hankering after the Victorian era, no hankering after the Edwardian era. This is the brave new Art Deco-ish world. And we'll have everything that goes with that. Doors, mouldings, wrought ironwork. Even the lamps are designed by Green and Crow, a local company, who made these wonderful copper uplighters for two buildings in Weston. One, the ballroom here, and the other one, the council chamber in the town hall. And it's amazing to see the difference. They're both still there. The college has restored these, and they are in pristine condition. The council hasn't, and the college has money, the council doesn't. So, but there we see them in Weston, all part of the plan. And this then is the overall scheme as envisaged. Pavilion, English gardens, Italian garden. And you can walk through either side the ballroom to the fields behind. Of course, since then it's all been blocked up. So you come through, you can see here, right way through to the sea, and at the back, also tennis courts. And then things begin to happen. Little bits get added. So we soon move away from the original concept. But it's still like that. And that's it, just before the college took it over. Tennis, that oh so English pastime, Morris dancing, there, bowling green. And inside, all the usual things you'd expect in a ballroom like that: chrysanthemum shows, dancing, wrestling, tennis, all sorts of things which still go on except the tennis. Actually, he taught me French. There's Treen. And make sure that you advertise it well. Railway posters. I mean, works of art, aren't they? You pay a fortune to buy those original posters, but here we are in Weston. Now, here's the strapline. Somerset all year round resort. So don't just come here for that fortnight, that last week in July, first week in August. You come here all year round. Okay, the sea's a bit blue on that, and it's in, but you get the idea. Or, of course, you could come by coach to the new bus station. Here in this period of 20s and 30s, not the councils. The councils don't build bus stations. These are built by the private company, the Bristol Traction Company, but Bristol Omnibus in the end. Two major properties here had to be demolished to make way for this bus station, Belvedere and Sidmouth House. So here we are into an era of demolishing buildings in order to build new. We haven't just started it, it's always been going on. So two really large properties there were demolished in the 1920s to make way for this new bus station. And that, of course, was taken down in order to have Carlton Mansions. But it wasn't taken down for Carlton Mansions, it was taken down because the Bristol Omnibus Company owned a piece of really expensive seafront real estate for no reason other than having buses in it. They decided, well, let's get rid of it, we don't need a bus station. And so that went. Meanwhile, here we are with another mode of transport that we thought would be the way to the future. Bring people in by aircraft. And so the council decided it would raise a rate, get parliamentary approval to borrow money, and build a municipal aerodrome. It's absolutely amazing. A town of 40,000 people, and the council is saying, hey, we need an airport. Blackpool's got one, why can't we have one? It's a way to bring people in. People were really seeing aircraft as the way to bring people in. Little did they realise they were sowing the seeds of their own destruction, because it's the aircraft which ended up taking people away from British seaside resorts to Spain. But that was a future generation. So here on a field just outside Weston, Harry Brown, the council surveyor, came along, surveyed the land, and they built an airport. Okay, it was a grass runway. It didn't become a concrete runway until the Air Ministry took it over in the war. But this was an important aerodrome, buildings again very much in that 20s, 30s style. And it soon became an incredibly popular airport, much, much busier than Bristol. Bristol Airport had started Whitchurch. The present Bristol Airport, of course, is an old wartime RAF airport. Should never be there. The RAF built Bristol Airport to be in the worst possible place to train pilots for landing and taking off in bad weather conditions. It should never, ever have carried on after the war. It's in completely the wrong place. In fact, in the 1970s, Weston was earmarked to become the regional airport. The running order was Filton, runway for the Brabazon, longest runway you possibly need, motorway there and railway there. After that, Weston, the Bristol City Council owned Knowlesgate, and so they decided they would go there, the worst option in terms of flying. Again, imagine what Weston would be like now if this was our international airport. It's, life is full of what ifs, isn't it? But here we are, this is the way forward, and look at the pride there, the entire squadron of flighters there. But this is amazing. First commercial flight, 31st of May 1936, but this is a leaflet. Look what it said. Weston to Cardiff in 10 minutes. Weston to Birmingham in 40 minutes. Weston to Paris in 150 minutes. Weston was the place you took off from to go to Paris. Within a year of opening, this had become the second busiest airport in England after Croydon. And then, 1939, the war broke out. Gone. That was the end of it. Very, very short-lived life as a properly commercial running aerodrome. But we're into this 20s, 30s era. Look at that. This is my favourite poster of Weston. Look what message that's giving. This is sophisticated. She hasn't got a bottle of Best. She's got a champagne coupe. Not the flutes haven't been invented yet, so it's still and it's red wine. She is clearly sophisticated. The beach is sophisticated. The people there are sophisticated, and the strapline is very clever. It's not talking about the blue sea. It's not talking about how we can compete with Torquay. But what it is saying is that our air here is incredibly healthy. Air like, well, we know that's so. But there they were advertising it, and people were pouring into Weston because it was healthy. The 20s and 30s, this, certainly the 30s, just pre-war, is the era of the body beautiful. The Germans are up to it, pre-Hitler, it's all part of that showing resplendence in the human form. And therefore, in order to do it, you've got to make sure you look okay. And just as nowadays everybody goes off to the gym and look at the biceps going, there it was swimming and it was fresh air and walking and cycling. And here's this wonderful poster. And I've made up my own version there because it still is. And then, of course, realising the tide does go out, of course we knew that, well, why not let's build a really sophisticated pool. And so here you can see a photograph of the open air pool being constructed. And this is what it produced. An enormous area of Lido swimming. Now, of course, the The open-air swimming movement became incredibly popular. Everywhere these great open-air pools were being built. And everyone nowadays moans that they've gone. But of course, in the 1930s, jumping into and enjoying cold water was something which we no longer do. So we could build as many open-air pools as we like, and apart from 1 or 2 days a year, nobody would go into them. We've become much softer. Our expectation of warmth is not what it was then. So here, coming into the open-air pool, and again, a sophisticated design from the drawing board of Harry Brown again, council surveyor, no international competition for it, just the local chap who works at the town hall draws it up in the stunningly good, sort of slightly debased Art Deco style. But here's the pièce de résistance, isn't it? It is this to use that, the word is hackneyed now, but it is an iconic diving stage. It is huge. It is the highest diving stage in Europe. Here's Western saying, we're not just going to build a new pool, we're not just going to put any old Art Deco style diving board, we're going to make it the best in the entire continent. So you could go to the Côte d'Azur and the diving stages would not be as high as the one in Western. So you know, that was, again, but the water had to be 15 feet deep. So you can imagine the problems of filtration. Nowadays it wouldn't be allowed because the number of lifeguards you'd need to have on duty now, and you have to clear the water for people. It just wouldn't be permitted now. But I can remember climbing to the top, taking one look and then climbing back down again. I could never bring myself to jump off. But as a work of structural art, concrete, reinforced concrete and steel, it was a beautifully curvaceous. It was really, really beautiful. But all went 1982. And the people who came here, again, the big international stars, Laurel and Hardy, Diana Dawes, or to give her proper name, Miss Diana Fluck, but she changed it for reasons which I'm sure would be quite easy to understand. She won her beauty contest at the pool when she was 17, and that propelled her into international stardom, Hollywood, all the rest of it. The sort of thing nowadays which wouldn't be approved, women parading along the catwalk and men cheering. It's not fashion in that. But she made her name, and you know, she never forgot Western. And whenever she was on the stage at the Hippodrome, she wouldn't stay in a hotel in Bristol. She always came to Western to stay overnight in a hotel in Western, would then go back to the stage in Bristol. And when the pool eventually closed and it remorphed as the Tropicana, she came along to open it. But then she developed cancer and that was the end of her. Lauren Hardy, all these big names there. Emperor Haile Selassie, well, what's he there for? He's there because he'd been rescued by the British when he'd left Abyssinia, Ethiopia in the war after the Italian invasion. British put him up in Bath, and he used to like coming along from Bath to Western and go to the open air pool. But he always joined the queue, and staff, Your Majesty, you must come along. But no, I'm a guest in your country, and I will join the queue. And so he always joined the queue to pay his half-crown to go in, and he'd just chat with people in the queue. You know, I'm the Emperor of Ethiopia, coming in for a swim. So it was rumoured he was going to buy a house in Western, but peace broke out, and so it wasn't necessary. More entertainment, bandstands, that wonderful thing of listening to bands in public parks. This, I think I'm right in saying that, is the only 10-sided Victorian bandstand left in the country. It's been beautifully restored. When it was being, it had to be taken down, and the restorers found the original paint after coats and coats of different colours, and so they took it back and they've repainted it in the original colour scheme. It was made in Scotland. But in Grove Park there were other forms of entertainment. The Grove Park Pavilion, where the car park is now, it was bombed in the wall because it was all glass. That was the end of it. So what we've now got in its place is that somewhat architecturally challenged public lavatory block, instead of that. Meanwhile, on the Grand Pier, there were also bandstands. Bands, we've got to think of bands then, rather like we would think of modern music today. It's what people went to hear. And at the Cove Pavilion, this Dutch oven, you can see what's called that, was built, so the band would be in there, singers in there, and the audience sat out there. Of course, it only worked when the sun was shining, and nice picture of the Dutch oven at night time, postcards of it. It was very popular. But then it was replaced when Marine Lake was opened with this nice new semi-coloured bandstand, the 1937 Cove Pavilion. And you can see again that curvaceous Art Deco 30s sense. And you could sit out in the deck chairs. It was defended from the wind, the sun was there, and you could listen to the orchestra, have your afternoon tea. And this was the Roselle Hotel. You can see the trams there, so this predates 37 when the tram stopped. And there you can see, again, that design. And here's the 1930s overhang promenade. This is the original Victorian wall. So when this was lost in the 81 storm, it was taken back to the original wall. So today, that's the end, rather than that projecting bit. And again, you see the projection here, that Art Deco style railing. Cinemas. Cinemas started to come in the 19 teens, and they started then to destroy theatres because it was hey, wacky, the latest thing. We want to go to the cinema, not to the old-fashioned theatre. And here's the first cinema in Weston, the Electric Theatre, showing a film called The Peddler. That is the site of today's Odeon. So the first flea pit, silent, of course. Then the next cinema, a really, really grand cinema in Regent Street, so it's called the Regent Street Picture House. It became renamed as the Gaumont. And again, the whole thing, cinema was all about, make pretend. Well, the whole thing was going to a film. You immerse yourself in the film and you forget the reality of the world in which you live. And so the entrance to the cinema had to be the same thing. It was about creating an image, an impression as you go in. So these very ornate fronts to cinemas, one wall, the remaining three walls are usually brick. It's huge cinema. 1913 opened. Then the latest cinema came 1921, the Central, and that is quite amazing. The irony of that is that cinema closed in 1961. It was demolished to make way for Dolphin Square. And what is it today? A new cinema. On exactly the site of the new cinema is where that. So 1961, 2018, half a century, and we've simply put back what was there before, but in a new idiom. Perhaps the best of all the cinemas there in West in terms of architecture and attraction was the Odeon. The Odeon chain, invented by Oscar Deutsch. Oscar Deutsch entertains our nation, Odeon. So that's his name. And he employed various Art Deco architects, including Cecil Howitt, who built the Odeon at Weston. Very unapologetically in the new Art Deco, Florida, Miami style. The emphasis is on the horizontal, not the vertical. It's on clean lines. It's on metal crittle frame windows. And it's big, it's glossy, it's shiny. Nowadays, I mean, it's so badly maintained now. But look at the capacity in there. 1,174 seats in the stalls, and another 633 up there. Huge. It's like when the Beatles came to play here in the 1960s. They stayed for a whole week in Weston playing there because they could get in capacity audiences. It's now, of course, full screen, and it's a mere shadow of its former glory. But this is Weston again, not just Weston saying we want to be part of the modern world, but it's commerce coming into Weston saying, yeah, we agree with you, we're part of it as well. And all those wonderful Art Deco lights, the neon lighting, and you could imagine today if all that overhanging balcony could be restored outside with neon light. I long to see the day when we have the whole centre with red and blue and purple and green strip lighting to really show off the Art Deco style as it ought to. But, and inside, of course, the organ. Every theatre, every cinema had an organ. There are only 2 cinemas left in the country now with the original organs. One is the Odeon Leicester Square, the other is the Odeon Weston Supermare. This is Weston's. It rises from the pit, the jelly molds all work, everything about it works. It's a proper cinema organ. John Compton built the organ in Downside Abbey, All Saints Church Weston, Victoria Church Weston, and the Odeon Cinema, and they're all still working. But they have concerts there every so often on
Have you seen
Sunday.
the organ loft?
Sorry,
Have you seen the organ loft? In the
You
cinema,
can go in and see the
I haven't. No,
Amazing.
right. No,
That's
that's
why they can never do anything with it because
it's all
it's
yeah.
so protected.
Organs, pipe organs. It's amazing how they get pipes into organ loft. So I've been in the All Saints organ, and from little pipes that big to things which are 32 feet. But there we are. And of course, we've recently restored the centre building. So again, all part of this Art Deco, all these features. Then, of course, the Grand Pier burns down in 19... Bit of a tradition in Weston. But Weston and Grand Pier burned down in 1930, and then it reopened 1933 in this new Art Deco style. Gone were the days of the fussy Edwardian style. This is the new... But this, I photographed from a council document, and what did it say on that? Disapproved by the council. The council did not like it, because it was a new design. It wasn't the old one. They wanted a reproduction of the old one. But this is the new Art Deco. And that's the one we came to like. These are various ideas that came forward. They didn't leave the drawing board. Does this interest you? And this one is overstamped Sir Lyndon Macassey, KC, King's Counsel, lawyer. It went up to the High Court in the end, and the pier was approved in the end. Same era then, we bring in architects in the modern style to give new schools. The grammar school had opened in Nithsdale Road in Huts, 1922. 1935, the county's architect, A.J. Toomer, created this new grammar school. Girls on that side, boys on that side, central clock tower, driveway down, keeping girls there, boys there, and the only places they met were bicycle sheds behind. The whole thing demolished in 1990 to make way for a new Broad Oak School, which is there rather than there, and very much in the Tesco School of Architecture rather than that. Same architect, Toomer, creates the new Magistrates Court in Weston, but not just the Magistrates Court, police station and police houses. And we took down the police houses in 1970 and put up that rather nasty, ugly, brutalist block that is itself going to be demolished, leaving the Magistrates Court rather isolated. It was part of a group, and the group's gone, and that's there. But same architect, Toomer, listed building, so that can't be demolished. And Bourneville School, the infant school, the junior school, they started in 1941, it was wartime, so they didn't finish it till 48, and that has gone. But this is part of that era when people are really, they know what they want to achieve. Sometimes it doesn't always work out. Swiss Villa, the home of Sir Eardley Wilmot, Swiss Road now. Sir Eardley Wilmot was the person who was championing the new Breendown Harbour scheme, so that we could bring ships into Weston and out across the Atlantic, and it would be faster than going to Liverpool. Weston would have therefore become the major west coast port in England. Ha ha. The foundation stone got washed away overnight, and that was the end of it. But this is where they started the structure, and this is what it would have been like. This is the 1864 scheme. This is a print of the opening day. The paddle steamers come in. Lady Wilmot comes to lay the foundation stone, and then it's all washed away. That's the end of it. Everyone lost their money, and they never ever attempted again to build a harbour at the end of Breendown. Swiss Villa itself, this is Locking Road, that is Swiss Road, this is Stafford Road, Beaufort Road, a rather nice little town centre estate. That's the house. Swiss, the only bit, well, it's not even part of the estate, but that building there is there now. That's called Swiss, Cotswold Swiss Lodge or something, but it's not part of the old estate. Subsequently, the owner wanted to develop the whole of that in that rather nice Blaze Castle hamlet style, as in Bristol. It didn't materialise because it was next to the cattle market, the railway line. It was too far south. The quality development in Weston was either on the hill or a bit further away from the railway line around Edinburgh Park. This just wouldn't work. So that never happened, and the whole thing was then turned over to other housing between the 1870s and 1907. The estate finally came to an end, and it's all been filled up with housing since. But this is the seaside, and therefore you've got to have grand ideas. Don't think when the council does something today and it fails that it's because it's the seaside way of doing things. You have grand ideas, and then half of them never leave the drawing board. Here's one of the really grand ideas by John Whittington in 1888 to build an enormous area of water. You can see, there's the Grand Atlantic Hotel, which he just happens to own, and this was the big plan. It was huge. Act of Parliament, set up a company, but they didn't raise enough capital, and so it never ever left the drawing board. So, hey ho, don't give up, go for another one, even bigger, even better. 1895, build a wall from Knightstone right the way down to Blackrock, the Santorin there. And it'll keep in this lovely yellow sand and this beautiful blue water, and people go to swim, and when a doctor raised the issue of what's going to happen to all the nasties that we send out into the water, they'll disappear to Wales or something, and again, that never left the drawing board. So, let's go for a different kettle of fish. Let's put in a nice big, you know the two boating ponds we have, we've only got one left, but they're enormous. That's Edinburgh Park, Grand Atlantic Hotel. So from Richmond Street right the way down to Cleveland Road is this thing, which was going to trap water, so everyone could swim when the tide's out. And the idea was the water would refresh itself twice a day. Again, grand idea. Or how about this? Weston's revolving tower at Knightstone. This is the man who designed it. It hit all the press. Everyone said, yeah, it's going to be great. Another plan to appear. There's the existing pavilion before the recent fire. This was going to be another pavilion on two sections either side of the pier. That never left the drawing board. Neither did this. On the seafront of the Ocean Earth project. We're now up to 1991, so within living memory. This was going to be a huge place for the study of wildlife It was a grand idea. It was sort of the Eden project, like that, but in Weston. Or the ski dome out at Locking, 2013. We're really up to date now. Hotels that have been proposed. The Eden Hotel on the seafront, a grand idea. Never left the drawing board. The Grand Central Hotel. This is what it was going to be like. This is Regent Street, seafront there. This was designed by a London architect. It is clearly a London hotel, isn't it? It's that style. Opposite the Grand Pier. The Grand Central Hotel was built, but it was sort of that bit. The rest of it never materialised. A replacement beach hotel on the seafront in the 1970s didn't materialise. And even finishing off from the Grand Central here, where there's that vacant spot and there's a bit of a greenhouse on the side of it, that came to nothing. That's only 10, 15 years ago. And the latest one, of course, is Mr. Wahid Samadi's CNN Estates replacement for the unfortunately burned down Royal Pier Hotel. And going to be replaced by this. Well, that's all now in receivership. I'm being recorded, aren't I? Yes, I will not say anything else. But here is the grandest of all the schemes. This was immediate post-war. Weston had been bombed, and we were looking to a bright new world. Out with the old, in with the new. Get rid of all this Victorian rubbish, and let's start afresh. Let's bring in the country's two finest planners, Sir Clough Williams-Ellis of Port Merion fame, and Lionel Brett, who was president, I think he was then president of the RIBA. So they come in, they look around Weston, and they create a master plan, which is unbelievable in its vision, called the Garden City, but it envisaged completely. It started from the idea that if you're going to design a new town, you have got to accommodate cars. So everything would be centred around roads and with adequate parking. We would get rid of all the nonsense of the Victorian era. So Clevedon Road would need to be a dual carriageway. We would need a road going out to something called a motorway. Drove Road here. The gasworks out, great big roundabout there, a new railway station here, with a road down through Edinburgh Park, with 2 blocks of flats at the sea end. The whole of the town centre removed. The centre here is the Odeon and the shops around it. And there, where the old Locking Road, I can go on to that. Where Tesco is now, that was going to be a bus station. Alexandra Parade there was going to be extended all the way across to the railway station. And Town Hall here, all of this central part of Weston, apart from the Winter Gardens Pavilion, would have been demolished for 7 8-storey blocks of flats. That was the boulevard would need to be dual carriageway and the road planned straight way through to the seafront there, and with a great roundabout on the seafront. So that's what Weston was going to be like. That was the plan. You can see here at Tesco, Locking Road. Interestingly enough, Locking Road car park was going to be developed for residential use. What are we now going to do? Residential use. But it was revolutionary. And the people of Weston actually were in favour of it. I think we were tired with war. We just wanted something new. And this was the grand plan. Not a single bit of it left the drawing board. You can see here, the boulevard comes through to West Street. West Street is dual carriageway. That's the Royal Hotel. We are now here, Winter Gardens. So he envisaged keeping all the gardens, the Winter Gardens, the Italian Gardens, but everything else. High Street was going to change. Massive car parking area, on what would now be Palmer Street. And here they are, an exhibition in the town hall. They even made this huge model, and I've tried, the model doesn't exist. I don't know, what a pity. What's that? You can see the seafront, that's the Grand Pier. This is only a newspaper cutting, so. That's, again, it's only from the newspaper. You get the idea? This is revolution. So, no money couldn't be raised for it, so that was the end of it. So the next scheme that comes in 1961, if you go to the museum, this model is there by Chamberlain Powell Bond. Is envisaged on the sea front. Well, let me show you Oxford Street here, Emmanuel Church there, Town Hall's over there. This became Dolphin Square, but this predates Dolphin Square. There was going to be a big conference centre where the new cinema has been built. A hotel, 21-storey hotel on the seafront. That's the bus station, which then, of course, was still there. And a lot of apartments. In order to do it, they had to remove people who were already living there. So they got compulsory purchase orders to remove that tightly knit area of working class housing. But again, the money wasn't available. This was very different from the Clough Williams Ellis plan. It's only 10 years later or so. I've coloured these in to show there's the town hall, that's Waterscott School, and again, you can see high-rise blocks. To give you some idea of scale, this is Emmanuel Church. That's the conference centre, which was going in there. This is what we got. This was the next one, and the one that did leave the drawing board, Dolphin Square. Except the hotel wasn't built, but the bridge to it was built. Trouble is, it went nowhere. So they then took the bridge down, and we subsequently built the hotel, the Premier Inn.
Yeah.
So we're always chasing tails, and the rest of it was built, but you can see on that drawing it's very, very watered down from the previous idea, and that has now gone. Other things which didn't occur, there were grand ideas for churches, but the First World War had changed everything. The men had come home, they had seen carnage, and they weren't going to church again in the same numbers they had hitherto been. So, generally speaking, a church which hadn't finished its building by 1918 was not going to be finished. Congregations had diminished. However, Weston, always being behind the trend, was, well, I've just said it's ahead of the trend on many things, but here we were still trying to assume that people all wanted to go to church. So this was the idea for a new St Paul's church. Well, the present St Paul's at Clarence Park is big, but this looks like a cathedral. Great building, never left the drawing board. Sunnyside Methodist Church in Clevedon Road. That wasn't built. Well, that bit was built, the church hall, but so was the church. The church itself never left the drawing board. St Saviour's Church in Locking Road, which is now a block of flats. Grand plan, spire was too expensive, so didn't build it. Transept was too expensive, so didn't build it. Couldn't afford the final 3 bays, so didn't build it. So what they built was that bit. And put up a temporary west wall, and it's still there, and it's been converted more recently into a block of flats. St Jude's Church in Milton, a plan to extend it. That was never reached anything. And that's now the Greek Orthodox Church of St Andrew in Milton. And then Victoria Methodist Church, just across from the town hall. Again, the most enormous scale. The church is so grateful that these things never were built, because the cost now of maintaining them, it would just be embarrassingly high. And I mean, let's now descend into the utter realms of fantasy. A passion for change. Here is Mr. Wahid Samadi's plan of October 2013 for Burnbeck Island and his adjoining 3-pronged development sticking out from the rocks. Looks pretty, doesn't it? Well, you know, let's take it a stage further. You know, these are not my drawings. You know, we are dealing with utter fantasy. What are these things? Oh, that one again. No, this is Birtbeck Island. That's the lifeboat house. Are you being serious?
Yeah.
These are sometimes the people you have to deal with. But for the final episode, the Tropicana. As we all know, built in those wonderful days when people would go out into the cold water, it wasn't maintained really well, and so by the 1980s it was losing money hand over fist. And so over the years we've had these wonderful, wacky ideas for a new Tropicana, full of passion from people who have proposed them, but each of the propositions has never passed muster. Not able to raise funds, just wouldn't get through any planning process. But these, I just leave you with these various ideas that all sorts of people have had. So the one thing we've got nowadays is the computer, so you can draw all sorts of wonderfully impressive looking buildings, but they just don't work. They look interesting. None of them made any economic sense. So what we ended up with is something which did make sense. And it took a wacky artist to suddenly make everyone realise that, hey, there's something you can do with a building you've already got, without actually trying to do something that'll never work. So, Banksy and Dismal Land, and we come into what I think, what was the message he was trying to give us with that lavatory roll? So there you are, that's the final picture, because that will lead us in nicely to next week, where I want to concentrate on what makes Weston unique in its architecture, and how the concepts of regeneration might actually help us to appreciate that uniqueness a little more. So that's, we've gone through a lot of passion, and we've ended up with a loo roll. There we are, that's life. See you next week. Okay. Well, I finished 5 minutes early today.